So, first, I want to say welcome to everybody. I'm Latanya Lane, and I'm here with People's Action Institute. And we're really excited you're here for the very first session of Building a Bigger We, Popular Education Talks for the People. It's our new book club. So, throw up some emojis, throw up some claps. This is like a big deal. We're really excited about it. Today's special guest is Loretta Ross. I'm really excited about her book, Calling In. I don't know if you have it, but it's this.
I
It's
got it.
you got it, right? This is a good read. So we're going to dig into this. We're going to talk about everything that Loretta's brought through this book and through her work. First, I want to introduce you to this lovely, warm soul who has been welcoming you with me. Our co-host Devonte Jefferson. He's going to tell us more about the series. So, welcome, Devonte.
Much appreciated, Latanya. Appreciate y'all for being here as well again. Like I said, my name's Devonte Jefferson. And like I said, I appreciate y'all for having us here. And it's going to be a really good vibe. I'm excited for y'all to be here. So this is our first, this is the first in our series of book talks on the third Friday of every month. Each time we'll hear from a new author who's inspiring our movement for social justice with fresh ideas to scale and grow our organizing. And we'll even send you a book. They sent me a book. I got it. So make sure y'all sign up with the link in the chat. We're gonna put a link in the chat for next time. And if you haven't done that yet, invite your friends and fellow organizers. Like I said, it's a great book, and we're gonna have great books every single time. So you can sign up at ppls.ac/biggerwe. So we'll have that in the chat for you. So make sure you sign up. Tell a friend to tell a friend. It's gonna be a good time, and you're gonna see that. Like I said, Loretta Ross is super fire, so we're gonna have fun. We all want to hear from our special guest, Loretta Ross, and Loretta wants to hear from you as well. So please drop any questions that you have for her in the chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can while we're here. So back to you, Latanya.
Thanks, Devante. So, yeah, throughout, definitely make sure to drop your questions in the chat. You might have some now, but you might have some as the conversation starts. And before we jump into the conversation, I want to invite you all to help me welcome the Executive Director of People's Action Institute, Sulma Arias, to kick us off. Welcome, Sulma.
Thank you, Latanya and Devante. This is going to be so great. I am so excited. And welcome, everybody. And thank you, Loretta, for helping us to start our series of talks on building the bigger we. There is no one better than you to help us think about how we go deeper into ourselves, into our conversations, into our organizing and our movement in order to create common ground. You know, as a nation, we are more divided than ever. And as a movement, we sometimes struggle to come together, even with those who share our values. And we all know that when we are divided, the only ones who benefit are those who seek to keep us apart. So, Loretta, you have so much to share with us, which we can start to use today in our organizing revival, in movement for democracy and social justice. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And I'm excited to jump into the conversation. Back to you, Latanya and Devante.
Thank you so much, Sulma. So, our guest today, as we've said, is Loretta Ross, and she has spent her whole life bringing people together. Starting in the 1970s in Washington, D.C., where she led the Rape Crisis Center, she's worked with those who have suffered from trauma, especially low-income women of color, as well as those who create trauma. She's gone into prisons to teach feminism to rapists, and she's worked with civil rights pioneer Reverend C.T. Vivian to help committed white supremacists leave their own prison of hate. Experiences like these have shaped Loretta's worldview and what she now calls calling in, which is the topic of her book that we're going to talk about today. How can we avoid the pitfalls and toxic confrontations that keep our movement for social justice from realizing its full potential? How can we come together to create common ground with those that we deeply disagree with and those who've even caused us harm? In her book, Loretta walks us through how we can communicate more effectively with each other, to recognize our shared humanity, and become stronger together. So that's what we're going to dig in with her about today. Thank you, Loretta, for your work, for joining us today, and welcome.
Thanks for having me to work with your group.
So I feel like there's probably some of us who have had a chance to read Calling In. There are some of us who are really excited about the idea but new to the concept. So I thought maybe we would just start by hearing, what is calling in? Like, what is, when you use that language, what do you mean?
Well, I help promote and in some ways create the concept of calling in, though I'm not the original originator. It took a young person to actually create it. An 18-year-old trans man named Lone Tran created the concept in 2013. But when I noticed how unbelievably cruel people were to each
Mm,
other, particularly over social media, calling each other out, I thought that we had a better solution. And that's why I started teaching online courses about calling people in instead. Calling in is basically an accountability process. How do we address the harm that people do to each other just because we're human, not because we're mean? But how can we address that harm without creating more harm?
mm,
Because just because you've been hurt doesn't give you a license to go around hurting other people. And yet it's hurt people, traumatized people who are drawn into human rights and social justice work because of what we've been through. So we've got to learn how to manage our trauma because of what we've been through in a way that doesn't go around traumatizing others. And
yeah.
so I created the calling in continuum so that we could achieve accountability with grace and love instead of anger, blaming, and shaming. And I find it's as a love letter to the human rights movement that I've been a part of for 50 years. A lot of people ask me, well, what do you do when people are being intentionally mean? Or how do you deal with the authoritarians and the fascists and all of that? And I assure you, I've got a different strategy for them. But I'm talking about those of us who really want to work better together and simply don't know how to bring our best selves to the movement, our imperfect selves to the movement, because the cause is perfect. We don't have to be perfect nor expect everybody else to be.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, how you frame that of, it feels deeply rooted in our humanity and all the big emotions that we feel when we are fighting for things that we care about, and how we can navigate that well and not so well. And I wondered if you would share some of the experiences in your book. You do such a great job of rooting this in your own story and experiences that where you maybe didn't have the tools for calling in, but you recognize that there was a need and movement work. Like, I wonder if you'd spend some time talking about how this is different from what you've seen social justice organizers do, and the experiences that led you to write this book.
Well, I wrote this book in the 70s after 50 years of making a lot of mistakes. And I wanted to show people what had learned from my mistakes. When I was 25 and the director of the DC Rape Crisis Center, I was just a survivor of
Mm,
childhood sexual abuse and incest. And when I was invited to go into this prison jury to rapists, I actually went in there to curse them out.
yeah.
I wasn't trying to call them in because I was never able to get at my abusers. I thought you deserve everything that happened to you if you're incarcerated. But I was surprised when I got into Lorton Reformatory, which was DC's jail or DC's prison, and those convicted rapists called me in
Hmm.
and they were able to talk about how they had been victims before they became violators.
Hmm.
And I have to say that that built a human to human connection that was totally surprising to me. And that's why I date my calling in from that moment, even though back in the 1970s, I didn't have a word for that. I didn't know how they had changed me as much as I had changed them. It's only after
Right.
processing 50 years of memory that I was able to identify those stages in my life where I was forced to have conversations with people I was afraid of, with people I didn't want to have conversations with people that I certainly wouldn't bring home for dinner. But when you do organizing work, when you do coalition work, you find yourself having conversations with a wide range of people because you need them to build the power to create the change you want to see. And so I assembled all of those lessons and techniques that I'd learned over a 50-year period in the book Calling In. Most people write books, particularly these memoir kind of books, kind of on what their successes. Mine were on my failures, on the lessons that I should have learned earlier, but those lessons that only time could teach.
Yeah.
And by processing 50 years of mistakes and coalitions and things that I'd been a part of, I'm able to write this love letter to our movement and say, let's make new mistakes. Stop making the same old
Mm,
ones. We can actually do this, y'all. We can do better. And we can do it and find so much joy and so much peace. Even though we're looking at the ugliest things people can do to each other, it doesn't have to steal our joy and our peace and our sense of purpose. In other words, we don't have to become what we're fighting,
mm.
you know, to
That's
conduct the struggle.
that's like a really powerful invitation. And I think, I don't know, there's so much that you just shared there, but I think one of the things is the complexity of that, right? Like I think in all of our organizing, we talk a lot about accountability and wanting to hold folks who cause harm accountable. Um, but you talk about this as a strategic choice. Like you define calling in as a call out done with love, but you also describe it as strategic. And I think I'm curious if you can talk about how it's both and the possibilities that calling in creates that just simply calling out might not.
Well, when you call people out, you're putting them on the defensive. You're making them feel ashamed. You're making them feel that you are putting a spotlight on their mistake. And
Mm,
nobody wants to feel like that. Even if you're doing it for the right reason, you're going to produce the wrong effect.
mm,
Like Maya Angelou said, people may forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so when you make people feel bad by trying to join the work, by not being perfect in joining the work, you're going to produce the opposite of what you actually need, which is people to feel joyful and inspired to join the cause, not
right,
turned off because they're not perfect, that they don't know the right word, or that they expect to walk around on verbal eggshells for fear of not being as woke as somebody. You really don't want to produce that effect. And that's what calling out does, because you're using the tactic of blaming and shaming. When you're calling people in, you're using your inner respect for yourself and for them. And so instead of saying, I can't believe you said that in your calling out voice, you could use the invitational voice of calling in. That's an interesting word you use. I used to say the word retarded, but I've since learned that's not the right word. Could you tell me more about what's going on with you that makes you want to use that word? And would you like to hear from me about how I learned not to say retarded? I say neurodivergent now. It's always an invitation for to tell you more, because while we focus on racial diversity and gender diversity and class and citizenship diversity, the diversity we're least capable of handling is experiential diversity. Every human being has been through something different. And because of that, they're going to think differently about a lot of stuff. And yet we seem to think that difference is somehow demeaning to us, threatens us, makes us fearful. Isn't that what the other people want us to feel? When we should be delighting in difference. But think about it. Two siblings from the same household will think differently about things.
that's
And
all right.
so calling in is about developing our skill to handle differences with joy, not with fear, not with confusion. And by the way, we already do it, except we don't know we're doing it. Think about when a natural disaster happens, an earthquake or fire or something. We don't stop and say, well, I hope that happened to immigrants or that gay couple or that black family. We don't stop and ask all of that. We just ask two questions. Do you need help? And can I help? That's already in us. And I'm saying that we can bring that same innate empathy and compassion to man-made disasters like poverty and racism and all forms of bigotry. We got it in us, but it's socialized out of us as children, as this empathy should not be what we lead with, but something that is actually going to make us too vulnerable, as the right wing tries to say. I say, no, let's just use the natural skills that nature and whatever creator you believe in gave you, whatever religion you subscribe to, tells you to be compassionate. So why are we turning away from our inner selves to embrace outer hatred and then acting like it's natural to us? It is not. That is socialized in us. And so I love the fact that I'm not teaching people something like how to levitate and defy gravity. I'm calling on you to bring your already existing better self to these man made problems. You can do it. We all do it all the time. When we see a car wreck, we don't run and say, I hope it happened to the right person. We don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't have to withhold our better selves when our people are in need.
I
We
think,
can bring it out and enjoy the fact that we're bringing our whole selves to the situation.
yeah. I think it's really interesting how you talk about the ways that it can surprise you. Um, that you can have so much in common when as you're building relationship with folks that you have these deep disagreements with, or that use language that like incites, your rage. Like, but that there's this surprising way that if that's not the focus, if that's not where you start, or if you're being intentional about building across those differences, it can surprise you the relationships that develop, the safety that you can build with someone that you might not have felt safe with. Um, and I feel like the way that you were able to get that across in the book, again, is because you grounded it so deeply in your own experiences. What inspired you to do that, to kind of ground this in, you talk about, you have 50 years that you were kind of metabolizing in this moment, but you could have said, here's the three-step process, check, check, check. What do you think happens when you ground it in your experience, and how do you hope that affects readers?
When you offer your authentic self to people and use your vulnerabilities as strength, you're building
Mhm.
trust with people. And people only believe information from people they trust. That's just human.
Mm,
If they don't trust you, they don't believe you, no matter how accurate your facts are. And so calling in is a trust building process. And I find that as a Southerner, grits is my love language. I can talk grits to any Southerner. I have walked
mm.
into many a restaurant flying a Trump flag and started a conversation on fried green tomatoes and grits.
Hey.
Uh, and have a whole hour's worth of conversation. I might be the first black person they talk to for 2 hours about politics and everything else. But it starts with grits. Or in Maine, it might be lobster rolls. In Texas, it might be chili and barbecue. Whatever those cultural connections, those human to human connections that you already have, that you can offer and make as your way of establishing trust. Because you have to walk through the world as if you're holding people's hearts in your hand and you don't want to squeeze it too tight, just like you wouldn't want someone to squeeze your heart if they had it in your hand. And when you show up like that, it's amazing the conversations you will have. I get awed by how much I learn because I'm in a separate news ecosystem from
Right.
most of the people that I talk to across the divide. I'm not watching Fox News or listening to Andrew Jones or whoever that guy is. I'm just not. And so I learn a lot about their different experiences and their news sources. And instead of saying, you should never be listening to Fox News or you shouldn't be doing this, just tell me what you've been through.
Hmm.
Tell me what caused you to think this way. Tell me why would you want to use that word. I'm not going to debate your right to use it. I just want to know why you want to use it. And is it producing the effect that you want it to produce? And
Hmm.
would you be willing to consider other options if you want a different effect? Yeah, just treat them as regular human beings. The problem we have is that we attach labels to other people that are convenient for our brains so that we don't have to work too hard.
Hmm.
That's kind of how human beings operate. And
Yeah.
as long as we can go underneath those labels and see the humanity underneath those labels, I think we'll be far more successful in building a better world.
Hmm. Now, I know Devante has some questions for you, so I want to pass it to him. But before I do, we had a question from Katie Carter at New Jersey Organizing Project. So Katie said, "My question for Loretta: You describe major experiences having opportunity to use calling in over calling out. What simple suggestions can you give to remember to do this on a daily basis with regular people we come across? I read inspiring books like this and want to embody what I learn, but practicing is harder than agreeing." What
Let me
advice would
tell
you have
you,
for
you
Katie?
already got it. You already got it. If you ever parented a child or work for a stupid boss, you know damn well you can't blurt out the first thing that comes to your mind unless you want to get fired or send your kids to permanent therapy. You've already got the ability to put yourself on pause
Yeah.
and then select the response that suits your intelligence and your integrity.
Mm.
The fact is, we don't use that enough. If we're facing a political opponent or anybody else, or the woman at the DMV that's being mean to us when we're trying to get our driver's license, we don't put ourselves on pause as if they were our child or our boss. And yet, if we did, we're not going to give that DMV person the same energy she's giving us. We're going to give her the energy that really reflects our heart and soul. Because you want to lead with love, you want to lead with your heart. In all of these human interactions, whether it's at the big level where you're working in a coalition or at the specific level when you have a chance to express road rage and you choose not to. I mean, all of these are choices. The way I teach this to K through 12 as well.
Mm.
And I tell the children, you could always say what you mean, and you could always mean what you say, but you don't have to say it mean. That's
Mm.
always a choice. And the more you understand that you have a choice every day about how you show up in big encounters and little ones, the more you'll gain self mastery, the more you'll stop creating chaos where none is necessary and it ain't even working for you anyway. And by far, the more you'll be happier with the self you're becoming, with the growth you're able to show to yourself. Because I want to constantly make choices that I can look in the eye without shame.
Yeah.
I don't want to be ashamed of how I showed up. I'm also, and I don't want to get too theoretical here, my task right now is learning to move from sympathy to empathy. I have been a formerly homeless person, so I have no problems reaching into my pocket every time I catch the eye of a homeless person. I know I can afford it. I don't even know why they need it. I just know what this feels like to be homeless, and that's enough
Mm.
for me to give them money. But what I realized very what I wasn't giving them was my time and attention, which should have been empathy,
Mm.
because I was afraid of being sucked into their trauma and not wanting to deal with it because it might re-stimulate my own trauma around being homeless.
Yeah.
And then I realized that's some work I need to do. I've got a boundary on my trauma. Why didn't I ask that person I see every day what his name is?
Mm.
how he ended up in that situation. How can I help? You know, and so we're all on our individual learning curves. And by the way, calling in is like you got to practice this stuff over and over again. You don't get it one and done. And particularly for me, because I got a quick temper and I can slice and dice with the best of them because I grew up with 5 brothers and we would call each other's mama out and we had the same mama. I mean, we're really good at calling out. And so I'm still learning
Yeah.
how to make sure that I put myself on pause so that the better me shows up all the time. Instead of, because see, I write a lot in my book about the difference between being trauma driven and trauma informed.
Right.
My trauma will never go away, but it doesn't have to be the boss of me.
Right.
That's a choice too.
I think that's a conversation I want to get into with you in just a little bit. Because I want to pass it to Devante, but I really appreciate that taking the pause, like slowing down, asking questions, and really connecting, moving from sympathy to empathy as ways that Katie can practice that calling in. So, Devante, you want to dig into this a little more?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you passing it off to me, Latanya, and thank you, Loretta, for being here as well. Like this conversation is so good, and it's always great, you know, whenever you're able to get more out of the book, whenever you're able to talk to the author and you know really dig into some of that conversation. And you know, one of the current things that's really sticking with me right now is what you just said. You know, when you said you can always say what you mean and mean what you say, but you don't have to say it mean. I say that to my 3-year-old a lot. You know, whenever he's, you know, he just wants some juice. You know, he's just like, just say please. You know, that's all I ask for. You know, but nah, I super appreciate you being here. And I think the first question that I have for you, you know, you were talking about grits. So the one question I have to ask: sugar or cheese and butter? What we doing?
No, I'm a salt and butter kind of girl.
Okay.
Maybe cheese if it's already in there, but I wouldn't have put it in there myself. But my boyfriend, he's Jamaican. He thinks grits is another form of porridge, so he's going to sugar it up and stuff like that. I guess I haven't broken up with him after 28 years over it, but I.
that ends up turning into cream of wheat or something like that. I don't.
Well,
Well,
but see, I ate cream of wheat. I ate porridge. I ate, malto meal. I ate all of those things because I don't like eggs. So my mother was always looking for egg alternatives for me. So I ran the whole range of grains just to avoid eggs. But grits, salt and butter, please, and not too soupy. Because I love eating at Cracker Barrel. Because that's why I say I'm always preparing myself for the Cracker Barrel conversation. Because I love eating at Cracker Barrel. I'm a country girl, country food. But their grits are entirely too soupy. But I can have a whole conversation on that with somebody at Cracker Barrel, you know?
See, like you were already speaking to me because you know the book is amazing, but you know, being a Southern man myself, you know, just like I said, the grits, you know, Cracker Barrel conversation, you know, we're talking about the book. We're not talking about, you know, hey, we could be here all
How
day.
you talk to people that you are surprised to find yourself in conversation with. And I'm talking about finding your love language. You always have to go beneath that top label and words and speak to their hearts. And when you have those heart to heart conversations, you'll be awed by what you learn and what you share.
100%, 100%. And I know some of the other things that you talked about in your book. One thing that kind of caught me off guard whenever I was originally reading it, you know, before you got into the you know, into the organizing work, you know, you were working for the NFL, you know, which isn't, you know, necessarily known as a progressive environment. You know, they're all about so you know, so how was that whenever you were working there, and you know, how did that shape your worldview?
Well, I worked for the NFL Players Association, which is their union. I was their first Black employee back in 1975. they were pressured, the union was pressured to hire some black people because the entire union staff was white. And so they sought out a woman who knew football. I told you I grew up with five brothers. I'm from Texas, Dallas Cowboys down, right? So I didn't have to learn football. I was just thrilled to be talking to and getting a job at the NFLPA. We were having the first NFL strikes at the time because it was a slaveocracy. In many ways, it still is. Because the players at the time didn't own their names, their images, and their likenesses, the kneels that they just, are now talking about. So we had to go on strike. But I also encountered a lot of racism within being their first black employee and a lot of misogyny because, most of the union staff were former NFL players and they didn't understand about sexual harassment and those kinds of things. John Mackey from the Baltimore Colts, before Baltimore moved to Indianapolis, was the president of the union, but it was a very exciting experience for a 22-year-old at the time. I really wouldn't have foregone it at any time. And I think that's one of the reasons that I have so much ease working with men to stop misogyny and violence against women because I can talk bro language very easily. It's my natural environment. Those five brothers and a dad worked. I can talk about the NBA. I can go to a boxing match and have a ball. I mean, it's kind of hard finding feminist friends of mine who want to go to boxing matches. But that's the other thing I want to offer from my book. You can be your authentic whole self. You don't have to perform an ideology for people. Where they say, if you are this, you shouldn't like this. If you are this, you should not do this. Who in the hell made them the word and behavior police and stuff? And the more that you feel conscripted by what you can do, you're going to be angry doing organizing work because you're going to feel that you're performing and then you're going to assume everybody else is performing. I was asked once at Harvard when I did a calling in training for their conflict resolution unit by this black woman. She heard me all out in all of my presentation. She said, Loretta, that sounds good, but that sounds mighty like respectability politics to me. Me just pretending to paper over all these microaggressions I get all the time. I mean, what are you talking about? And instead of answering her question, I asked her one. I said, what motivates you to do the work? And she thought about it a moment and she said, I'm motivated by love. I said, so why aren't you addressing these microaggressions through love instead of anger? Why are you assuming the role of the angry black woman if that's not your natural role? If it's natural for you to lead with love, pursue accountability with love. You can turn to that microaggressor and say, I'm not quite sure what you meant by that comment. Do you have a minute for us to talk about it? Don't assume the worst of people because people are just their awkward selves with crappy skills going through the world. And if you walk around assuming the worst of people, that's kind of what you're going to get because whatever they give, that's how you're going to interpret it through what you've been through, not through what they've been through.
That's a great point. That is a super great point. I agree with that wholeheartedly as well. And then kind of piggybacking on what you said earlier about, being in the NFL and, being in the players union, you know, being with the union, you were already kind of experiencing sort of a calling in situation as well, because players would have to, sort of call in and, get together as a union to, make things happen. And then, kind of staying on that, sort of staying on that sort of topic as well. Whenever you're talking about things like that, calling in sort of kind of comes to calling out as well, so whenever you're talking about 2026 and, when you go to and when you go to just the way that sort of society is now. What are your thoughts on how do you feel how calling out can go too far? How do you feel about that?
Well, most call outs done by the social justice movement are done to address harm, and they want accountability for it. The problem that I see is that we have a lot of passion, but we don't match it with compassion. So we go about doing the right thing the wrong way. So I'm not going to fault people's passion or their empathy, but I do fault them from thinking they can learn from social media how to address it. That's kind of like learning how to have good sex from pornography. It ain't going to work. That ain't real. That ain't right. you know? Because I teach young people from 18 to 22 in undergraduate. And by the way, the course that I teach, I hope I don't get y'all in trouble, is called White Supremacy in the Age of Trump. I teach about fascism for 10 years. I've done it ever since he came down that golden escalator. I find that the people who populate my classes are full of radical politics, but they don't have the radical love practices to handle them responsibly. So as soon as they learn about neoliberal capitalism, they turn to their parents and call them out because they are still working for the company. Or the first time they learn about Columbus Day, they turn around and start fussing at people for celebrating Thanksgiving. I mean, it's just, it just goes on, on and on. And so then I kind of pushed back on them. I said, well, I love the way that you quote Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks because these were friends of mine. And they talked a lot about radical love. I said, so let me understand. You can quote Audrey, but you don't believe her when it comes to radical love practices. You can quote James Baldwin, but you don't believe him. You can quote Dr. King, but you don't believe him. And see, that's what I invented calling on for, to address the cognitive dissonance between how good you think you are inside and how you're actually behaving. That's a reconciliation process there. I'm not going to call you out. I'm not going to call you in, but I'm going to call on you to figure out how you're going to show up for yourself. I don't have the magic words to make people change, but I do have the capacity to make them think about how they want to show up, either in a coalition or just in one-on-one relationships with their parents and their loved ones and their friends. Be in control of how you show up. Don't be an accidental jerk. If you're going to be a jerk, be one on purpose. You're still showing up as a jerk, but now you just want us to act like it was a joke and it wasn't funny. That kind of thing. And so we will never find those magic words to change people. And so that's why on the front of my book, it's got that arrow that comes back to the self. The first person you call in is yourself. Yeah. And it all starts with you. And you have to embody and model the world we're trying to build. And you can't model hate and say we're going to build a world of love. You can't model contempt and say we're going to build a world of respect. You can't model calling people out and then expect them to want to hang out with you because they don't need any help feeling worse about themselves. They can do that all by themselves. And as Tony K. Bambara said, we have to make the revolution irresistible with a big smile on our face, with welcoming arms. In my book, I analyze that we've got enemies out here, opponents, people who do not want people to get along, people who profit from dissension on their way to power and wealth and stuff. But for the rest of us, we got three different kinds of allies. We've got our proven allies, people that we've been through stuff with, who we know will not run when the going gets tough. We've got our problematic allies. These are the people that we disagree on things around the edges, but we're all pretty much convinced that the world needs help. And so my mother might feed the hungry, and I might ask why they're hungry in the first place. Different strategies, same problem. But I think the biggest set of people out there are our potential allies. the people where all we know about them is that they're kind to their neighbors, or they, work at the breakfast program feeding people, or that they speak to me every time I come out my door. Maybe
Mhm.
that's all I know about them. But I already know the one thing I need to know about them. They ain't in a hate group. Because if they were in any of those things, none of those kindness to neighbors, speaking to people, a black person coming out of the door and a white, all of those things that I can observe about them already give me the starting point to see if I can turn this potential ally into someone I want to invite to the next meeting I go to, that
Mhm.
kind of thing. And so we've got to stop affixing labels to people because of what we've been through, when we haven't even stopped to ask what they've been through. In the academia, we call it less me search and more research. Stop
Mm.
centering everything on what you've been through, like the whole world should share your story and your narrative.
Mhm.
But if you use your compassionate sense of inquiry about people, your natural curiosity, and by the way, I should say I'm a hardcore introvert. So I'm always coming out of my comfort zone when I'm talking to people, always. I'm one of those people that gets angry when my phone rings because it's interrupting my books. So I'm not speaking from an extroverted personality, let's make friends kind of posture. I'm doing this because it's necessary to build a human rights movement that I think is necessary to save the planet and the world. This is my contribution to the struggle.
Yeah, no, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I agree with you on being extremely introverted. Yeah, it's like me even turning the camera on a Zoom, I'm just like,
Really?
what am I doing? Nah,
Really?
nah,
Yeah.
for sure. And then the other thing you said, we got to put it on a t-shirt, less me search, more research. That would sell millions. And then also the other thing that you said, whenever you're talking about, other, people in groups that only want to do bad, that kind of reminded me of one of the conversations that we had earlier in the week. Whenever you said, when you see someone only calling out, it kind of reminds you of some of the experiences that you had with COINTELPRO, where they kind of infiltrate movements to divide people. Would you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, because I was a radical leftist in my 20s, I call myself a recovering Marxist, um, as well as a recovering Christian, if I might as well come on completely out of the closet. Um, I encountered a lot of dissension within the leftist groups that I was working with, whether it was around trying to get rent control in Washington, D.C., or building the Rape Crisis Center, or fighting apartheid. All of those things gathered a group of leftists who spent a lot of time hyper criticizing each other's social practices, organizing practices and stuff. And it was also at the time when we were dealing with COINTELPRO, which was the infiltration by the FBI of all the leftist organizations. And this led not only to character assassinations, but actual assassinations. I actually had a friend, a colleague, assassinated in 1980. And so when someone came into one of our organizations, creating a lot of chaos, I always would think this is because of one or two things. Either they're incredibly inexperienced and naive, and they just think this is how they need to show up, or they're a provocateur planted in us to break us apart. Yeah. And neither of those looks are very good on you.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt if I think you're naive. But if you persist in those destructive behaviors, then I'm going to attribute to you more malevolent motives because you've been offered a chance to grow and change and you refused it.
Mm.
If I
Hmm.
offer you a chance to grow repeatedly and you choose not to, then I'm going to assume that this chaos you're creating is intentional. And another way I look at it too, the purpose of the human rights movement is not to service people's personal therapy spaces. We're Our purpose is to address the reason you need therapy in the first place, but not to actually serve as that space to the movement for attention, for power, for, whatever. I recognize that you're trauma driven, but I'm only going to tolerate that for so long and help you become more trauma informed. And again, if you're offered that chance to grow and you choose not to, then I'm going to come up with another strategy to reduce the impact of your chaos.
No, that makes total sense too. And like I said, the calling in is all about it's all about the choices that we make and the strategy that we make and the conversations that we have as well. And I know in the book you also talk about some of the choices that we can make in conversations to keep us from calling out in a negative way. So can you kind of walk us through that a little bit as well?
Well, I analyzed the call out culture and realized that people didn't think they had choices but to call people out to achieve accountability. And so I created something called the 5C continuum, which is calling people out, publicly shaming them for things you think they should be held accountable. But the most important word in that sentence is that you're doing it publicly. Because if you just wanted them to correct their course, you could have called them in privately. You could have slid into their DMs, if that's the right word. You could have pulled them off to the side and said, we don't say retarded anymore, or we don't say trans this anymore. We say this, or we get people, you could have done it privately. The fact that you did it publicly meant you wanted others to see you holding somebody else accountable. That's called virtue signaling. And that's not a good look either. I see a lot of virtue signaling among white people who call themselves fighting white supremacy. They are always calling out other white people for not being sufficiently woke. And I'm like, excuse me? Y'all had 500 years to study for this test, and now you're trying to cram it in overnight into somebody else's brain. What the hell? That is not helpful. Kind of thing. A lot of virtue signaling. Now, the ultimate calling out is canceling somebody. That's the second C. That's when you think somebody has done something so egregious, you want to get them really, really good. So you want them to lose their jobs or at least lose their platform or their reputations. That's when you summon your inner Karen. I'm going to get you fired or expelled for doing this. Except that that's the same thing the prison industrial complex does. What do prisons do? They silence people, they exile them, and they dispose of them. How us acting like the prison wardens of the left or progressive movement going to succeed any more than the government does with all its resources? Contradiction there. Calling in is not the opposite of calling out because it's also an accountability process. But instead of using that anger and that shaming and that contempt, you're using to lead with your sense of integrity and your respect and respecting that the person is going to be different from you, have a diverse set of opinions and experiences. So you can say something like, when you said that at the meeting, could you tell me more? Those are the three most important words. Tell me more. Few people fail to respond to an invitation to tell you what's going on with them. And just with those words, you assured them of their significance, that they matter, that they're important. Those are the things to make people feel, even if you disagree with them. An invitation to a conversation is not a subscription to agreement. It just means I want to talk to you. And then calling on, as I mentioned, is where you ask people to do better because you want to reconcile their inner good opinion of themselves with their outer behaviors. So if you see someone being kind on one instance and then mean on another, you can ask them, which one are you? Are you the nice person when it's somebody you know and the mean person when it's somebody you don't know? which one are you trying to be with me right now? Because I don't want to be surprised by the nasty person, if that kind of thing. And then
Mhm.
calling it off is the fifth C. And that's when you choose to disengage because you have no obligation to continue unproductive conversations with people who are tripping, who are just in it for the fight, for power, gaslighting you, lying to you, manipulating you, and whether in person or offline, you get to spend your finite time on earth. And so I recommend disengagement because there's still 85.9% of the people you can use the other four strategies on, or
Mhm.
three of the other four strategies on, instead of wasting your time and showing your ego thinking that you can flip people, that you can make them change. And by the way, people ask about how we deprogram people in hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan and the neo-Nazi movement. Because I was the only black person and the only woman who ran an opposition research center
Mhm.
back in the 1990s studying hate groups.
Mhm.
And what I want to make sure people understand is that nobody flips somebody else. If they didn't have these questions going on already, rolling around in their souls, you couldn't get inside and help them rethink things like that Adam Grant book, Think Again.
Mhm.
And by the
Mhm.
way, it's one of the books I highly recommend
Mhm.
if you're considering books. What it is that they have questions that are already going on in their minds that you, with respect, can start providing answers to. And that's where the crevices open up, the openings open up for them to rethink the choices that they've previously made in life. But you can't even get your toe in the door if you come in with contempt. That's one of the reasons that I'm talking to people all the time about giving up FAFO, the F around and found out kind of impulse.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because while it might give you a momentary satisfaction to say, I told you so, you're harming the movement,
Mhm. Mhm.
for your
Mhm.
own ego and satisfaction. Because if people have shown the ability to rethink their choices, to reconsider things that they've done in the past, you need to offer them a way to be welcomed in the land of ambiguity, in the way of rethinking, because we all live in a land of ambiguity. I mean, wisdom is knowing what you don't know, or at
Mhm.
least knowing
Mhm.
what you don't know. That's what I'm saying. That you don't know everything. And so instead of leaving those people to be reabsorbed into our opponents, we should be rolling out a welcome mat, saying, oh, okay, maybe the Iran war was too far. Maybe this was too far for you, or whatever. And say, well, do you want to talk more about it? Would you like me to share how I got here and you share how you got there and maybe have a coffee about over the next football game and let's talk some more about it, that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
I think that there is an arrogance among progressives that I told you so impulse is just dominant.
Mhm.
And we
Mhm.
are so eager to show off how woke we are, and it's harming the movement. We have to build the power of the people who are radical, liberal, not so liberal, in the middle of the road, and pull all those people together in order to defeat authoritarianism. We can't make the same mistake that Germany made and only focus on who we perceive. I mean, the liberals in Germany chose to make the communists in Germany their enemy instead of the Nazis in Germany their enemy.
Mhm.
And
Mhm. Mhm.
unfortunately, I kind of see some of those tendencies in our society today. I wonder
Mhm.
if the Democratic Party is more afraid of its left than its right.
Mhm. Mhm. That's a great point. That is a super great point. That's why those C's are important. That's why this book is important. That's why calling in is important. That's why it's so powerful because it's a sign of someone's commitment to bring people together. And that's why this conversation is important as well. I have a couple more questions, but I'm gonna pass it over to Latanya. But before I do want to get into one of the questions from the chat. And this question comes from Michael Neal. Big shouts out to you. Good to see you in the chat as well. And Michael says, I've been thinking about how to use this with would-be authoritarians, not their leaders, and I actually think we can if we take People's Action co-founder Gail Sincada seriously when she says we have found the enemy and it's not each other. Can we distinguish between authoritarian leaders and those who are in so much pain that they follow them because they don't see option B?
I think that's a wise observation. For me, in my mind, I've distinguished between the puppeteers and I think people's pain is legitimate. I mean, we're in an awful economic situation. We're in a situation where people have been given license to be hateful to each other. We're surrounded by a brand of Christianity that's writing books on empathy being toxic, which is an unrecognizable brand of Christianity I grew up with. I mean, you know, I don't recognize Christ in that kind of Christianity kind of thing. And so, and yet, if we don't take people's pain seriously, even as we disagree with their solutions, they will not feel that we care about their pain. And they will fall for the charlatans who pretend to care about their pain, the puppeteers who are simply manipulating them. But I find that when people have these cult-like behaviors, attacking their leaders is the wrong way to go. Because what you're signaling when you do that is that you're attacking their ability to think for themselves. You're accusing them of being puppets, incapable of thinking. You're trying to act like you can lord over them and tell them what to think. And you're not building up the good parts that's in them. See, I believe that when we are in a polarized environment and we pay too much attention to what we think people are doing wrong, that means we're neglecting to pay attention to what they're capable of doing right. And Adrienne Marie Brown, who I deeply admire, says, what you pay attention to grows. And so if you only pay attention to what people are doing wrong, that's what's going to grow. But if you pay attention to what they're doing right, that's what's going to grow. And so to someone that I think may be doing something wrong about being mean to immigrants, I would probably say, Joe, I noticed that when you come to the lodge, you are really good with the strangers that are at our lodge. Can you help me understand why, just because they're not in our lodge, you're mean to these people? And is that how you really are? Is that how you really want to show up? And who's telling you you should be mean to another human being? And why are you listening to that, Joe? Because I know you're a good man inside. Those are the kinds of conversations we can have.
Oh, 100%. No, I super appreciate that. That's all I got right now. I'm gonna pass it over to Latanya because she's got some really juicy questions that
I've had the privilege of thinking about this for over a decade. So
yeah, nah, for sure. I'm loving this so far. I hope everybody in the chat is enjoying this as well. Like I said, this is great. I'm having so much fun.
Yeah, and I've really appreciated people's questions. We have a few more space for other questions. So if you have questions, please feel free to keep dropping them in the chat. It's been really great to get to just have this candid conversation with you, Loretta. I don't know if I had 10 years, if I would come up with these insights. So I just want to make sure credit where credit's due. It's both time and also the way that you are metabolizing your experiences. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the work that we're doing at People's Action Institute. So we, as an organization, we've been a pioneer in deep listening. We kind of, folks in the organization recognize the deep divides that were driving our nation to places where we couldn't even sit at the same kitchen table with each other. We couldn't work in the same spaces. And we saw how toxic that division is. So we've had a deep canvassing program. We're moving into a deep listening project where we're planning to connect with folks across the country and talk to them about their hopes and values. And we're going to kick it off. It's called Hear America, and it's a nationwide campaign to have more than 1 million nonpartisan deep canvas conversations before Election Day. And it's going to be us, it's going to be partners. It's going to take a lot of us to have 1 million conversations. But I'm curious what advice you might give us as we head out to have those million conversations with 1 million folks. Like, what advice could you give us? Some of what you've maybe already shared, but some insights that you've had when you've been talking to folks in different parts of the country. I'm thinking particularly when you were in Appalachia, talking to the wives there. Also, you've been in all sorts of different spaces where you've had to talk to folks that you needed to build trust with quickly. How would you do that? What advice would you give us?
Well, as a Southerner, we take 15 minutes to say hello because we got to figure out whether you're worth talking to.
Yes,
So I'm
as a
going to leave.
Southerner, I've seen that for sure.
Right. So as a Southerner, I'm going to leave with all my Southernness. First of all, ask about you, ask about your family. If I feel so inclined, I ask if you're churched, even though I'm not, that kind of thing.
So you start with
But
relationship, it sounds like.
right, it starts with relationships all the time. But the unasked question is where you get to the real
Mm,
insights of people. And so after I get through those, I'm here to do deep canvassing with you, tell them what I'm here for. And maybe my next question after I tell them where I'm coming from would be, could you tell me what's been hard about your life?
mm.
You know? And tell me what are some of the challenges you had to overcome to arrive at where you are? Or what
Even
challenges are you afraid that your children will face?
like even as you're asking those questions, I can feel myself responding. Like, what makes those questions so effective? Like, why does that hit me right in the heart?
Because you're doing several important psychological things with them. You're assuring them of their importance, that they matter to you.
Mm,
You're showing a deep interest in their answers, from which you're going to mine your next questions, your next response. You're taking their intelligence seriously.
mm.
You're not assuming that they can't think for themselves, that they can't think. The only thing you're not doing is agreeing with their perhaps false solutions to their problem. But you don't even have to go there. All right. And
Yeah.
so once you ask, here's a real example. I teach calling in online. By the way, anybody wants to find my classes, my name is my website. So I'm easily found, LorettaRoss.com or LorettaJRoss.com. Both will find me. And my next one is on May 27th on imperfect activism. I think we have a QR code we can put up at the end of this to show people how to
Right.
register. And all of my classes are always very expensive. They're $5.
I have $5.
And if you need a scholarship, I'll give you one, but I'll look a little side-eyed at you because it's the cost of a cup of coffee. But anyway, in one of my classes, one of my participants said that she'd had a 15-year fight with her mother-in-law
Wow.
long before Trump was elected, even though she's firmly in the MAGA ranks. And they battled for 15 years, critique on how she cooked, how she raised her children, how she went to church. Everything was a
Wow.
sight of a fight. And she said, after I took your course, Loretta, I changed my approach. Just when we were getting ready to get to a fight, I stopped and said, why don't you tell me what was hard about raising your son, who we both
Mm,
love?
mm.
And she said that changed the whole dynamic of their relationship.
I bet it
Because
did.
for the first time, instead of defending herself, she was asking her mother in law what was going on with her. What was
Yeah.
hard about her life? What were her experiences that were different from her daughter in law's experiences? Remember that experiential diversity I started with?
Yes.
And she said 2 years later, we were having the longest and deepest conversations we've ever had
Wow.
after 15 years of fighting.
That's incredible. And that gives me so much hope too, because I think a lot of folks, you know, some of us have been dealing with this since 2016. Some of us have been dealing with it before, but there's folks that we really care about. I know there are people in my life who I really love and I miss them, but I don't know how to get back to them, right? So just hearing that someone has had that long term, this having that relationship be one way and that it's possible, even in those long term disagreements and those long term divides, that we can still find each other and still reconnect is really incredible.
Well, I ask a question that's probably age specific since I am a boomer of people in my age group. Who would you like to see at your funeral who you think may not
Mm,
be there? That's who you need to prioritize practicing calling in on. Because
I
that means you've got a long term bond that has not healed yet.
mm,
At your funeral, let's start by having a conversation with them. What's gone wrong? What can we do better together now that we're at this part of our lives?
not me grabbing pen and paper to make a list. Okay.
Well, I'm auditing my life too, because there's a lot of people I've hurt in my life, and I wish that I could find them
Yeah.
and reach out to them and apologize. And that's the other thing I talk about in my book: how you apologize right away, and then how you apologize the right way.
I love that part because I feel like it took into account that in the moment, you might not have what you need to actually say what needs saying. Can you talk more about that? Apologizing the right way, right away, and then apologizing the right way?
Well, it's embedded in my lesson about how do you respond to being called out. But I should have said how you respond to being called out, in, or on. Because no
Mm,
matter which tactic they choose, you're going to feel shame. You're going to feel like somebody has put a spotlight on your mistake, and you're going to feel embarrassed and stuff. And so I offer a 3-step response to that: 1, 2, 3. And I try to teach it in really easy, memorized lessons. So you're not having to pull out my book to find the right page to figure out
it's like,
what
hold
to
on.
say. First of all, step one, thank them. That sounds counterintuitive when they've called you in or out or on, but you're thanking them because they have gifted you with something very important: their time and attention. They noticed you. They are assuring you of your significance, that you're important. Because if you were unimportant, they would have ignored you. All right? So
Right.
you can sincerely thank them, even though you're not feeling very thankful in the moment that they got the spotlight on your alleged mistake. Step two, reverse that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'm going to consider what you've said. You reversed it because now you assured them of their significance,
Mm,
that what they said mattered to you, right? That's the time you can offer the right of way apology. I'm sorry I may have caused harm, but thank you for bringing it to my attention. Notice what you have not done with step two, though. You have not said, I agree with you, because you get to consider that in your own good time. Just because somebody called you out in that moment doesn't mean, oh, I'm sorry, I got to roll over and, throw my feet up and, assume I'm the worst thing other than dog shit. You don't have to go there.
good.
You could just say, I heard you
Yeah,
and I apologize for the harm. And I'm going to consider what you said. Step three, turn the calling out into a calling in. But while we're on the topic, I care much about you as I do about myself. So are you okay? Are
mm,
you feeling unheard? Is there harm you're experiencing that you'd like to bring to my attention? Would you like to? Can we talk about this some more? 1, 2, 3. Thank them. Tell them you've heard them. Ask about them.
I
That
love that.
that neutralizes all the bad air of a call out. because you're talking human to human now.
Right.
You're not victim perpetrator
Mm,
kind of thing. You just done away with that whole binary by how you showed up, how you responded to it. And by the way, you don't call people in because of who they are. You call them in because of who you are,
that's right.
how you want to show up. You don't do it because they're deserving or undeserving. You're doing it because your integrity deserves you working on your better self.
I love that. And I also like, so I did appreciate how in the book there's like so many, here's a concrete way that you can interact with apologies. Here's a concrete like list of ways you can engage with conflict. And also, I think you describe in your book, we have been in social justice spaces. Um, there's a lot to remember, and organizers, people who are doing movement work, um, I don't want to say we are perfectionists, but we do like to get things right. So I'm
No,
curious.
we don't understand that 99% of the things we do are going to be wrong, and we have no tolerance for imperfection.
Right. We are a perfecting bunch. So I'm curious like how we can follow recommendations like what you offer in this book. What are ways you might invite us to do this organically as we're learning and might not land it every time, as we might forget, as we might need to revisit? How do we balance these tools with not getting caught and calling each other out?
How we handle mistakes is often buried in our childhood memories. When you were a child, and if you made a mistake and you were punished and shamed for making that mistake, then you're going to feel it's very, very natural to punish and shame others for not being perfect because you were punished for not being perfect. And you weren't taught self forgiveness. So that means you don't know how to forgive others when they make mistakes, when they're not perfect. And you're
Right.
taught the pursuit of perfection is what you're supposed to be doing. That is such a horrible way to raise a child. Because a child, when they make a mistake, they should be assured of the fact that they're loved despite making that mistake. And then they should be taught what they can learn from making that mistake and
Mm.
taught that mistakes are not fatal, that walking through life is full of mistakes,
Full of mistakes.
right? And
Full.
the pursuit of perfection is not only unachievable, but undesirable.
Hmm.
And so we come into this social justice work thinking that I have to be perfect, or at least pretend to be, so that nobody peeks behind my facade. And I have to have the expectation that others will be perfect too. One of my 18-year-old students wrote that calling out is the expectation that everybody should know everything they need to know at the moment that they know it.
Mm.
I'm like, well, that's so unrealistic.
Right.
If you walk through life expecting everybody to know what they need to know at the moment that they need it, you're going to be constantly disappointing yourself
Yes.
and disappointed in yourself because you don't know everything you need to know at the moment you need it. And so let us, as adults, decide whether we're going to continue those toxic patterns of our childhood when it comes to making mistakes, or are we going to make different choices about not pursuing perfection in ourselves or others, for not punishing others for not being perfect, and not walking around with the expectation that I can only work with people who are perfect,
Mm.
who don't make mistakes. We just got to let go of that whole pursuit of perfectionism because it's not doing us any good. It's making us have low opinion of ourselves and others. And it's not even necessary. That's the other thing. There are many pathways to the mountaintop. There's no rule that says your pathway is the only one or even the best one.
Right. Well, I'm gonna offer one question from a participant before I hand it to Devante, who has a question for you. So Mike Ortiz from Atlantic City, New Jersey, asked, "Does Miss Ross feel calling in has the capacity to help with the current political climate?"
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I find it helps all the time. Um, I'm a member of a lot of progressive groups, some more actively than others. But I'm constantly telling my progressive groups, I don't want to talk to y'all. Y'all are 90%ers. Y'all already agree
Mm,
with my worldview 90% of the time. We disagree around the edges. I might think that reproductive justice is the number one thing while you think climate change is the number one thing while somebody else might think gun control is. That's okay. We disagree around the edges, but we all know all those things need to be addressed. I'm more interested in talking to the people whose civic engagement is just showing up to vote once a year,
hmm,
or who run a prayer program for the homeless people at their church, but they think all leftists are out here, communists out here to destroy the world. Like the way I break it down, I want to go talk to the Cracker Barrel people, the people who think the Kish Cracker Barrel is something they want to buy and put in their homes. I don't want
and
to turn my noses up at them because
right.
I bought some of that quiche myself, so I
Cracker
can't
Barrel is
talk down
amazing.
about them,
Right.
right? But for whom not trying to show off how smart I am, but
Yeah.
showing off how kind I can be is the goal.
Mm,
And I want to seek others who want to lead with kindness, who are proud of how kind. And kindness is different from niceness, by the way. Niceness is ignoring it doesn't trouble you to address it.
yeah.
Kindness is about addressing harm with compassion. So I want to show up and show off how kind I can be. And it's often disarming for a lot of people. Like the other day, I had a rude cab driver. And at first, I was caught up in giving it back, that same energy. And then finally, at the end, I said, I don't know what kind of miserable day this guy is having. And my first impulse was to withhold the tip. And then my
Mm,
second thought was, no, because he's having a bad day and because of who I am, I'm still going to tip him to show him that just because he's giving off all this negative energy, I'm not going to give it back to him.
hmm.
I'm still going to tip him as if he had given me a great cab ride with no problems. Because that's who I am, not because he deserved it.
That
And it
is,
takes a lot,
yeah.
but it becomes easier over practice because you're always buffing up your own integrity. And if you make that your mission, it becomes easier with time.
And it shifts the climate for sure. I know Devante actually had a great question about kindness and the way that you talk about it. I think it's probably going to be a great question to close with. So, Devante, do you want to come and bring this question around kindness uh, to follow up to where Loretta was just took us?
Yeah. Actually, before I ask the kindness question, I have to ask this question because it's the one question, like, normally when we have more guests, I would say, hey, we ask everybody this question. But Loretta, you're the first one. So you're going to be like, hey, we ask everybody this question. So this is the theme is building the bigger we, right? So here at People's Action Institute, we talk about building the bigger we. So what does that mean to you? And how can calling in help us do this? And then we'll ask about kindness later.
Well, I can give you the metaphysical answer and the scientific one. Both are available to me because I'm a STEM girl. I majored in chemistry and physics, so I got a science STEMmy brain that's very
Mhm.
linear. But I also am a Black woman, a daughter of Africa. So I've got a metaphysical answer, so I'll give you both. The metaphysical answer is that we're all the descendants of mitochondrial Eve. We all got the DNA of Africa in us. So I actually see all of humanity as my cousins, just many times removed, growing up in different climates that bleached out different skins and produced all these different, this human variety that we delight in. And so, because I grew up with a lot of cousins in Texas, I treat everybody as a cousin. Just I got good cousins, bad cousins, mean cousins, good cousins, light cousins, dark cousins, cousins I want at the picnic, cousins I wish mama wouldn't invite. I mean, I got it all going on. And that's kind of how I walk through the world. They might not know I'm a cousin, but I know they're a cousin. So that's the metaphysical answer that has a little bit of science in it because, the DNA tests are proving that we're all related. But the linear answer is this world has always been harmed by a minority of mean, hateful people who want to create chaos and evil for their own power and profit. But they're never are and never have been the majority. And the only thing that has ever stopped them is the power of good people, hope, speaking up, doing the right thing. And I've been to 40, 50 countries. I can't even speak any language other than English. And I've met kindness all around the world. People trying to do the right thing, take care of their families, contribute to society, create peace. That's the majority of the world. So my linear answer is that there's more of us than them. And you can attract more bees with honey than with vinegar, and so that's my linear brain saying the way you fight hate, the way you fight bigotry is with love, with being so attractive so fulfilling to people so that they can become better human beings. See, the other side thinks that you're a better human being by owning more. I say we're better human beings by being more. And that's what I want to appeal to in humanity. And again, I don't have to create it out of whole cloth. It's already there. It's already there. I see it in the generosity of poor people, in the generosity of some rich people. I mean, I see it all over the place. And that's what I want to appeal to. And I maintain hope with that rationale. First of all, they're all cousins, and I got good cousins and bad cousins. But fortunately, I got a lot more good cousins than I got bad cousins.
Same, 100%. And I think that is probably the perfect way to cap this off with.
Yeah.
So I super appreciate you, Loretta. This is the perfect way to end like my work week, honestly. So I seriously want to thank you so. Yes, exactly. Yes. See, there was so much more I wanted to get into, but like time.
Well, have me back. We can always talk.
Oh yeah.
I make my living running my mouth, so I can always be persuaded to do that.
I love it. I love it. Nah, I appreciate you being here. This was super fun. I appreciate everybody being in the chat as well. I hope everybody's feeling as inspired as I am. Like I said, this was a great.
Cousins. I saw somebody put cousin down there. Yes, y'all are all cousins.
That's what I'm saying. These are all the good cousins right here. Exactly.
I'm telling you now.
Yeah, so if if anybody else wants more, just like me, you can join us back here. May 22nd. We're having another conversation in this ongoing series of everything that we're doing. Next episode, we're going to have Dr. Maria Stefan, the author with Erica Chenoweth of Why Civil Resistance Works, which is also great, another body of work, super fire. These two have studied.
Are you gonna put my button up there, the way for people to sign up for my class?
Yep, we're actually doing that as well. Yeah, so Tim's actually going to put that in the chat as well. So if y'all want to sign up for that, we're going to have the QR code up there as well. So definitely sign up. It's only $5, so definitely sign up for that if y'all want to call in some more.
Everything I do is only $5.
Yes,
that's my economic model because I always want accessibility to be primary.
Yes, and we definitely appreciate you for that, especially in the society that we have going on right now. We super appreciate that. And like I said, calling in is more important now more than ever. So like I was saying, next time we're going to have Dr. Maria Stefan and with why civil resistance works. And these two have studied nonviolence movements around the world to find out what makes them successful. So I know y'all want to hear about that. Like I said, it's going to be May 22nd, 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Just like today. So if y'all want to sign up for that, go to ppls.ac/biggerwe. So Latanya, I'm going to slide it over back to you.
Thanks, Devante. And thank you again, Loretta. If folks want to throw some emojis, just want to put in the chat all the love. This has been such a rich conversation. I feel like I will be digesting it for quite some time. So thank you for sharing so much with us. And also thank you all for being here. We were like a little nervous first day of school getting ready, and y'all have been the best like classmates ever. Thank you. So thanks everyone for being here. We hope to see you all again next month for our conversation with Dr. Maria Steffen. In the meantime, my favorite organizing poem is by poet Marge Piercy. When we were putting this together, I thought of her poem, The Low Road, because it has everything to do about building a bigger we. So I'm going to leave you all with these few final words from that poem. It starts when you say we, and you know who we mean. And each day we mean one more. Thank you and see you next time. DJ Devante, can you give us some music to play out to?